Hey y'all, it's Dr. Court with the very first episode of The Rewrite, where we are rewriting our ever after unapologetically. On today's episode, it's just me, again, kind of like the intro, but I swear I have a rock star lineup of guests that will be coming at you guys in the coming weeks. You guys are going to love them all. They are so deeply rooted in sharing their stories. But for now, there's some things I want to talk about, some expectations I want to set as we move into this rewriting phase. I want to talk about my why. I want to talk a little bit about my labels. So if you did the exercise in the intro episode, then you know what I'm talking about. If not, go back and listen to that and do it. But got some heavy hitting things that I want to talk about. That way, I'm kind of setting the expectation of what you guys are going to get when you listen to this podcast. So there are some seasons in life, I think, when you realize something maybe quietly unsettling about your life. Or maybe if you're like me, it might not be so quietly. Perhaps the universe is being very loud with its intentions with your life, whether quietly or loudly, doesn't matter. But maybe it's when you notice that you're still being introduced to the world around you as a version of yourself that you no longer fully align with. You're not living inside of that space or that person or that label anymore. Not really because it's false, maybe some of the labels were true, but more so because it's incomplete. It doesn't tell the whole story of who you are. For a long time, I think I lived inside a collection of labels. Some of them made sense on paper, some of them were true, but they all slowly stopped making sense in my body at one point. Some of those labels were wife, ex wife, stepmom, mother, daughter, sister, nurse, professor, educator, leader. Then I became a grieving daughter, and then I became a new wife. Lots of labels, lots of things that, again, some were true, some were not. Some made no sense at all and were just products of other people's insecurities and vile nature. Those are a little harder to say. Fat ugly whore, the new supply, the stepmom, as if that's some negative thing to say. I've been called too much, not enough, too loud, trashy. My tattoos make me trashy, trash bag, naive. The list seems to go on and on as to what I have been called. Either way, the list does continue to grow because for whatever reason, I happen to allow it to do that. But something I have figured out after years of stewing, wondering, bending myself into a mold of what other people needed me to be or wanted me to be, I started to have to realize that labels don't just describe your life if you don't let them do that. If you do, like I did for a really, really long time, and egregiously don't even want to talk about it long time, they begin to start defining the edges of your life. And then they start coloring in the middle of your life. And if you're like me and not careful, you shrink every part of who you are just to stay inside of those lines because it makes other people more comfortable. It doesn't make you comfortable, but it makes you more palatable for other people. Maybe you find yourself being a people pleaser, making everybody around you comfortable except for yourself. I know it's hard to sit with that, and sometimes it's hard to admit it, but I did. I finally had to admit it, and for a long time until I wrote Uncaged, my best-selling memoir. You can get over on Amazon. And I made a whole host of people real mad, big mad when I wrote that. But I finally found a way to make myself more comfortable when I wrote that book. But here's a truth that you're getting here for the first time ever out loud. I haven't admitted it to anybody. Uncaged wasn't written from a place of clarity. It was truly written from a place of friction for me. It was from the place of tension, of living a life that looked functional. It appeared successful, it appeared meaningful, happy, put together, well put together. Everybody's always said I'm well put together. But internally, something was splitting. I was losing myself. The woman that I was meant to become was fading with every single new chapter and new label that I was subconsciously accepting. I didn't really have a language for it before I started writing. I didn't know that they were labels. I didn't know it was this subconscious thing I was doing. I just knew I felt suffocated and smaller and smaller in the bottom of bigger and bigger cages. It was almost as if I was living multiple lives at once, and none of them really fully belonged to me. They didn't embody authentically who I was. Sure, on paper I was a professional version of myself. Many people still recognize me as that first. I was a, nurse leader. You've been called a clinical strategist and educator. I've worn many hats within the nursing world, and I was always someone who could hold things together even in the chaos. Functionality under pressure was always kind of my stick. I could stay composed while things were falling apart around me and people looked to me to keep things together. But I quickly learned in that role with that label that functioning is not the same as being fully expressive. It's not fully living in your authenticity just because you are functioning. I think I spent a long, long time confusing the two things, thinking, well, I was successful, so I was functional. And personally, I became an ex-wife about a decade ago, still carrying echoes of a story that I had outgrown before I even left. I still had to emotionally untangle it, even though I had grieved before I left. I still had parts and pieces of that story that needed healing, and I needed to be able to live in the space of two things being true at the same time. Sure, I was and am still someone's ex-wife, but I am a lot more things than that, and I had to figure out a way to live within my authenticity. And then, I added even more layers to it when I became a new wife. So, learning that becoming new inside of a relationship doesn't erase what my nervous system had already gone through, what it still remembered from being someone else's wife, and also entering a new phase of being part of a new dynamic as far as I was concerned, but it was an already existing dynamic that, had been part of someone else's story before I came along. So both can be true at the same time. You can be new and it can be part of an old infrastructure. And that can be really difficult to live in that parallel at the same time, unfortunately. And then, I was also, with that new wife phase, I was also given the label of stepmother, which to me have found to be very, very positive and very rewarding in some ways. And it's been very treacherous in other ways. And, if you're on social media and you hear about it, stepmother also has a very negative connotation to it. A lot of times, there's a very added layer of you're the new supply, or you must be, the affair partner, or things like that. So there's lots of negative connotations that come along with that role. Our society has painted them there. Hollywood has painted them there. So, and I want to be really, really gentle as I navigate this because there is so much invisible complexity with that role that it feels like people are not allowed to talk about it. You're inside of this family system that's building attachment, and you're navigating love that's supposed to be unconditional. You're doing loyalty and boundaries and identity shifts for not only you but for the children that you're now tasked with having in your life. You never really have a clear definition for what you're allowed to be. You go back to those same labels that I've had forever. You're too much, or you're overstepping, and you're too little and disengaged, and you're not doing enough. There's no clean label for how to exist in that space without shrinking yourself to make other people happy, to get rid of that societal label that is placed. And it's a difficult space, a difficult layer to be a part of. Um, and all of those labels were definitely true for me. I was a nurse, I was a ex-wife, I'm a wife, I'm a stepmom, I'm a mom. But like I said in the beginning, none of them were a complete picture of who I am. None of them captured the real internal experience of becoming each layer of someone new in real time, without permission, without language to describe it, without a rule book being given to me on how to navigate these new chapters that are a part of my life. And even since publishing Uncaged, I have again found myself back in, really and truly, I would call it the fake comfort of, familiar cages, maybe even some new ones. So the complexity of all of the things that we go through, all of the labels that we accept, whether they're familiar or whether they're new, whatever the case may be, it makes us multifaceted. It makes us understand that adage of two things can be true, the different parallels that come with life. One of the newer ones I found myself in is a grieving daughter. Um, my mother was one of my biggest bullies in this world, but also one of my biggest anchors in this world. So, when you talk about it, wow, the complexity of the two things can be true. She could be an anchor, but she was also, my first bully. Losing her, it didn't create just a sense of grief of losing my mom. It really rearranged my entire identity. I didn't have anyone left that I needed to please or to set boundaries with. Some of the versions of us really only exist in a specific relationship with a certain person at a certain space in life. And my entire identity was wrapped up in making her see that I was enough, making her love me more, making sure that I could show that I lived up to her expectations, which she had many, and they were they were set high. The bar was set high. But then when that person is gone, it adds a layer of, you don't just miss them, you start to question like who you are without them. Who am I now that I don't have this expectation to live up to? Who am I now that I'm not people pleasing her? And also, now I'm a daughter without a mother. So I still have the normal parallels that go along with losing a parent, but that kind of grief doesn't just stay in that moment of loss. It really, it shows up in the small moments, in the silence, in the times I'm people pleasing her, I'm setting a new goal for myself. I can feel it in my body that I'm not on a stage anymore. I'm not performing for her anymore. And my body feels it. And it's even longer. So after, someone passes away and the funeral's over and the expectations are over and the stuff is packed up and the world has gone back to normal and thinks you should be okay by now, you can still feel these things in your body. And then when you add, the additional layer of, for my mom, I went from being no contact to her medical point of contact at the end when she was put into hospice. So it was just the disorientation that came from that when she passed away has really survived so much longer in my body than the world thinks is socially acceptable too. How long are we allowed to grieve? You get a certain number of days from work for bereavement, and then you're supposed to be up and at 'em and okay again. And there are a lot of variables that come along with losing someone, because life continues, life goes on even when those people have passed away, no matter how wonderful and sincere the relationship is or how treacherous and toxic it could be. And now, in the midst of losing my mom and being a mom myself and a woman, I have now found myself in the midst of perimenopausal rage more times than I can even count. I'm sure my husband probably has a running tally somewhere so he can keep up with how many times I've lost my mind. But navigating this changing body as a woman, as a mom, and my child is in his teenage years, has been incredibly lonely, incredibly humbling. And despite being an OG member of the healthcare community, having been a nurse for several decades, I still have no idea how to fix it. I have no idea how to make myself feel better. I have no idea how to not sweat multiple times a day, and the brain fog and the fatigue and again the rage. If you see me on the road, just move out of my way because it is completely uncontrollable. So while perimenopausal is a label, it's not false, but I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to get back to whatever normal may be. And it seems whatever plot in life I have found myself in the midst of a lot of plot twists. So many so that I think I have crowned myself the queen of reinvention. And I really want that to be what this podcast is, what it's about. I know there are lots of podcasts out there. You don't have to choose to listen to mine. And I don't want mine to get lost in the noise of everyone else's. The rewrite is a different space. It's a space for raw, real emotions. I don't do editing here, so you might hear me clear my throat, or I might need to pause and drink. Some of my guests are going to cry. Lots of them have cursed. We need to take a pause every now and then, and I don't want to curate that. I don't want to edit those things out because that is real life. It's messy and it sometimes isn't aesthetically pleasing and it doesn't always fit into the societal norms, but that's the space I want this to be. I want the rewrite. The rewrite is not going to be about negating or denying where you've been. We are not storytelling to shy away from our own accountability over here. We self reflect. We are sitting in the thick of all of it so that when we reinvent ourselves, it's with full honesty, full clarity, and full intention. We're not here to rewrite truths. We are not here to allow the people who may have harmed us or the harm we've done to escape any level of culpability. That's not what rewriting is. We are over here noticing where we've been living. Maybe it's inside of a story we didn't fully author. Maybe we made choices that weren't great. Maybe with the choices we were given, we did the best we could. We navigated the best that we could. But now in the rewrite phase, the reinvention, we're asking ourselves honestly, what is mine to carry and what is mine to put down? What is mine to no longer own? I want you to sit with that. I want you to think about it. Think about what you no longer own. Maybe use it as a journal prompt. Maybe do a note into your phone and, what are the things that you need to be held accountable for? What are the things that you need to self-reflect on and change and grow from? We've all been through negative. On the show, we're going to talk a lot about identity loss, divorce, trauma, infidelity, betrayal, grief, all of the hard sticky things that we're conditioned to keep silent. We're going to talk about here. We're going to unearth them. We're going to excavate all of those emotions, because without getting those emotions out, without unlabeling ourselves, you can't make room for anything new to grow. You can't reinvent when you're still full of all of the old emotions and muck and grossness. You have to be able to let some of that go. So you have to decide, what am I going to hold on to and use for motivation, and what am I going to put down or hand back to whoever it belongs to. And that's really where the unlabeling activity, kind of begins, starts the process. So like I said, it's from my intro episode. Go back and take a look at it, do it. Because before you can really truly rewrite your life and reinvent yourself and step into the ever after you're meant to be in, you have to see what defined you before. And it's not rejecting it. So really listen to the activity. It's not about rejecting anything, but we're separating our identity using that assignment. We're separating the good from the bad. We're separating what we need to carry to, who am I when I stop performing these roles, these labels? What am I? Who am I when I'm not letting other people define me? Who am I when I'm not being witnessed through someone's expectation, whether too high or too low, whatever the case may be? And when am I, who am I when I am no longer holding everything together for everyone around me? What does that person look like? And, I'll be honest, it was a hard activity when I did it. Um, I didn't want to sit with the negative ones, and actually had an easier time of writing the negative labels that have been put on me than I did the positives, which hello speaks volumes. And I think the universe was like, knock, knock, you need to sit with this and really listen. But I had a tough time writing anything positive about myself. But once the activity was done and I was able to hold that, albeit small, I have added to it, but it was small in the beginning, very positive pile in front of me and put it somewhere safe and special to my heart. I was able to feel myself kind of physically shredding some of those negative pieces, um, you know, and start rewriting from somewhere new with new symbolism for me. And in the vein of symbolism, this podcast is launching on my wedding anniversary. So that timing for me was purposeful. When I was planning on launching this and wanting to think about a date that meant something to me, it was intentional. Because for me, anniversaries, birthdays, things like that, are often really a sign of something great, celebrating someone else, celebrating, a marker of some sort. And anniversaries are, celebrating a marker of stability, commitment to someone else, something greater than yourself, a level of continuity. But they're also mirrors, because when you have an anniversary that no longer exists, they kind of ask you to notice where you are inside of the life that you're building. What or where are you showing up intentionally? Where were you maybe not showing up intentionally before? What has changed? Maybe thinking about what has expanded for you, what you've outgrown, what you'll tolerate from yourself and from others, and really what is still becoming for you. So it's a date on a calendar, but it's more than that. It's a marker for growth. It's a measuring tool for yourself. And I don't share that really just as a symbolism. I share it as a truth for myself. I'm living inside of a life that is both beautiful and chaotic and sometimes traumatizing, but it's always evolving. It's always changing, and I can make the choice of whether or not I have it change for the good or whether I focus on the bad, whether I use the bad things that have happened to motivate myself, or do I use them to sit in it and stay in the toxicity and the negativity and let it, rot its way from the inside out. And, sometimes we don't always have language for that level of complexity that comes with sitting in it, or choosing the motivation piece, choosing to see our way forward. Uncaged was the beginning of my voice returning, and I'm hoping that the rewrite is what will happen when we stop asking permission. We start following our own rules. We start building our own ever after, the one that we were meant for all along, before we were able to sit in the silence and really hear our own voices. So if you're here, I want you to know this is not about fixing yourself. It's not about becoming better necessarily. It's about noticing who you already are beneath everything that you've been asked to carry. Every label, every expectation. Who are you beneath that? Because truly, sometimes the most honest thing you can do is unlabel yourself long enough to hear your own voice again. And that's where we begin. Together, rewriting our ever after for what it's supposed to look like. So I'm happy you're here. I hope you stick around. If you want to be a guest, let me know. I am just so excited to have you guys, and happy rewriting.